All right, gang. So I'm not going to really touch on a ton of stuff here with the sheep heart. We obviously talked about this in class. We have the pictures here in front of us to study from. So I'm just going to kind of point some things out here. All right, but not go in super far in depth. So we have things we want you to know here. Okay. Try and point them out as best you can with the pictures. All right. And that'll kind of help you understand relatively what we're looking at. So we have our model. We have our anterior view. We have a sheep heart frontal section, so we open this guy up, okay? I want to start with figure 2.5 here. Let's zoom in. So, we zoom in here. What's the first thing I want to look for? I'm going to get orientated, okay? So I know I'm anterior. First thing I want to look for is the atrium, okay? Atrium here. Remember, atrium's always above. What's right below that? We have the ventricle, okay? Ventricle's here. I'm thinking that this guy, let's draw a little line here. I'm thinking that this line here is what would be roughly where the interventricular septum would be, okay? It's a little harder to try and determine, okay? It could be here, it could be here. Now I'm thinking about it, actually looking at it a little bit deeper, the left ventricle is always bigger than the right ventricle, so I'm thinking that this is probably the interventricular septum here, okay? Right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium over here, left ventricle down here. Remember, the left side is always bigger, okay? That's because the muscle has to be bigger because it has to contract more, has to generate more force to push all that blood to the rest of the parts of the body. Versus the right ventricle, not as big, and that's because, okay, it doesn't have to push blood as far because it just goes to the lungs, which is always situated right next to the heart, okay? So left ventricle is always bigger. So we got those two guys out of the way. So remember, the atrium's here, blood's going to go this direction. And remember, the right ventricle is going to push it out through the pulmonary trunk. Right here. Okay. That's going to go out to the lungs. It's going to come back, which we can't see the vessel here, but it's going to come back through the pulmonary veins to the left atrium. And that'll come down here, right ventricle, and that'll get sent out right here through the aorta. Okay. So a lot of arrows there, obviously. But hopefully that helped you guys understand just kind of the directionality where blood's going through. And this is the brachiocephalic artery, okay? All right, so now let's open the heart up a little bit more, okay? So it's a little hard to get orientated. I find it easy to orientate yourself by always finding this guy first. Always a super thick part, okay? Always a super thick part of the endocardium and the myocardium, okay? And you know it's the IV septum because when you see these two holes like this, respectively, that's how you know you're looking at one of the chambers of the heart, okay? So the holes here, what I'm looking at, is the ventricle, and the atrium would be kind of up here. Ventricle's down here, atrium would be through this area. That makes sense, okay? So, let's try and point some things out. It's really hard to kind of see. Let's zoom in a little bit further, far we can. Tricuspid valve is this little flap here, okay? Little flap. Remember, it's always tricuspid on the right side of the heart, okay? The right chambers. Pulmonary valve would be up here somewhere, okay? It's kind of hard to see, obviously, but it would be the pulmonary valve up there, and that's in the right ventricle. IV septum, right ventricle, boom, we got that side done. Aortic valve right here. Remember, this is the valve that prevents blood from being shunted backwards into the left ventricle after the heart's already contracted, okay? Left ventricle, papillary muscle. Remember these guys down here, and they have the chordae tendineae. All right, I'm going to try and get this eraser out of the way so you can see it. The chordae tendineae, all right, these little kind of tendinous-like structures that attach to the bicuspid valve here. And in here would be the left atrium, okay? So that's really pretty much it. There's not a ton to really talk about here because remember, these are just the pictures. There's not really a ton to talk about here, but if you can manage to memorize where these things are, you guys should be fine, okay? So we did that. Let's chat about this. Blood flow through the heart, okay? I very briefly just kind of highlighted it here, but let's go through it up here on a model, okay? So let's start with number 1, okay? Put the following structures in the correct order as blood flows from the superior vena cava through the heart, okay? So remember, blood always comes back through the superior vena cava, and what it's going to enter is the right atrium. Where is that guy? There he is. Okay. Always going to enter the right atrium. Then it's going to pass through this valve structure here, okay? What's this valve called again? Tricuspid valve. Okay. Number 3 there. Passes through there into what we know. So since we're in the right atrium, what's the chamber below the heart? All right, it's called the right ventricle. Okay. That guy is situated right there. And then what blood is going to pass through? Remember, there's another little flap here, another little valve that goes into the pulmonary trunk. And that is the pulmonary valve, okay? Blood's going to pass right through there. Then it's going to enter the pulmonary trunk, all right, which we have it right here, number 6. It's really bad, 6. And then where's it going to go? Well, remember, is it an artery or a vein? Is it an artery or a vein? I don't remember. Remember, arteries always go away from the heart, and since this blood is technically going away from the heart, I think this is the pulmonary arteries it's going to pass through, okay? So it goes to the pulmonary arteries. Can't see it here, but it's going to go to the lungs. Okay, so we'll draw a lung here. We'll draw a lung here, okay? So it's going to go to the lungs next. That'd be number 8. Really bad, 8. Once it's done being oxygenated in the lungs, the blood is, it's going to come back through the veins, because remember, veins always go backwards, right? And the reason why it's red here, why it's pulmonary veins and it's red, is because it's been oxygenated, all right? The blood has been oxygenated. So pulmonary veins, this would be number 9. Okay. Good. Number 9. What's the first structure it enters, okay? Right atrium over here. This one must be the left atrium, okay? Number 10. Atrium passes through a valve. It's not the tricuspid, but it's the bicuspid or the mitral valve, okay? Number 11. That's going to enter this chamber of the heart. Right ventricle over here must be the left ventricle on this side, okay? So that is number 12 then. We have 2 more here. What's the valve here that protects blood from being shunted backwards from the aorta into the left ventricle? It has to pass through it. That's the aortic valve. And then, of course, we have our last one here, just by process of elimination. This is number 14, the aorta. Okay, the last little pit stop before it gets shunted, or gets sent out to the rest of the body. Eventually, will come back through the heart. Okay, so for a little review, let's look at this little summary here. Blood enters right atrium from superior and inferior vena cava, which we didn't talk about it, but we could also say, yeah, that also has the inferior vena cava as well over here. Okay. Blood in the right atrium flows through the right AV valve, so the right tricuspid valve or the tricuspid valve, into the right ventricle. Contraction, so when the heart contracts, okay, the contraction of the right ventricle forces the pulmonary valve to open, and then the blood's going to be sent up through the pulmonary trunk and into the pulmonary veins. Okay, and likewise, blood is distributed right and left. Okay, it goes to the lungs, these guys here, where it unloads the CO2 and loads in O2, aka where it reoxygenates. Okay, then the blood is going to come back from the lungs. Okay, so it's going to come back from the lungs. It's going to come back through the pulmonary veins. So we have the left side and the right side respectively. Okay. Enters left atrium, flows through the left AV valve or the mitral valve, bicuspid valve, into the left ventricle here. Contraction of the left ventricle contracts, makes this aortic valve open. The blood goes up. The aortic valve is going to close to prevent blood from shunting backwards into the aortic valve. Okay. Blood in the aorta is then distributed to every organ in the body where it unloads O2 and CO2 respectively. And then blood returns to the right atrium via the vena cava. All right. And this process just repeats over and over again. Hundreds, thousands of times a day for everyone. Okay. This is how it works. Okay. So that's it. That's all of them. So we did sheep heart. We talked about the blood flow. All this stuff down here is for you guys to do on your own end. So identification of all these structures on your own. I'm not going to go through this because I want you guys to use this as practice. Okay. So that is everything for lab 2. A little bit shorter compared to last week, obviously. So we did sheep specimen here, sheep specimen, and then trace the blood path, or trace the path of blood through the heart, okay? Now, I would encourage you, when you're doing this, to one, of course, use your review down here, okay? So you have this section, and you also have the review section, okay? I'd strongly encourage you to use that, okay? Do this, obviously, for one of the learning objectives. What I also found most insightful when I was in school, okay, is to actually try and draw a heart. Okay, how do I draw a heart? I'll do this. Like this. Split the guy up into 4 chambers. Okay. And you know that each chamber, or each atrium, rather, is going to have something coming back to it. And then you can also draw from this direction here, you can draw these chambers, because you know that that is where the blood is going to be sent away through. This is always going to be bringing blood back. Now trace the path of the blood. Okay, remember we have these valves here too. Now trace the path of blood on your own. And just based off this picture, I think it's possible. Okay, so just really quick. Okay, vena cava, right atrium, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, pulmonary valve up to the lungs. All right, so it's gone up through the lungs. Lungs, pulmonary veins, left ventricle, bicuspid valve. I'm sorry, left atrium, bicuspid valve, left ventricle, aortic semilunar valve, aorta. And it does this over and over again. Okay, so it's possible. You can do this on your own. All right. Well, guys, that's everything I'm going to say for you. Study hard. All right, not too much stuff to do in this lab, okay, but it's doable. All right, put your time in. This can be hard stuff. Make sure you just put your time in with this, and you guys will be fine for our next celebration or our quiz, which we will have on Monday. All right, so best of luck studying, guys. We'll see you back in lab next week.